When I began at this college, we had 3,000 students. And we had not as diverse of a room in the house that we do now. And I want to say thank you all from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of the Diversity Committee's heart, from the bottom of Miramar College's heart, from the EEO folks at the district, from their heart. Thank you so much for showing up. It means so much to all of us to see the hermandad, brotherhood, sisterhood, that we're showing up here today and demonstrating that Miramar is not a school that's a little island where it's not diverse. People don't care about diversity. I want to say thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause for that one. My name is Adrian Arancibia, Dr. Adrian Arancibia. I teach English here. I've been here 15 years. I am the co-chair of the Diversity Committee along with Ms. Terry Hubbard, who's in the back. Personally, I would like to thank Ms. Terry Hubbard for all her dogged efforts to make sure that this event happened here. We've been talking about this event for 2-3 years, and it's because of her singular focus and push that this is happening here tonight. So give Terry Hubbard a round of applause. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Diversity Committee for helping to organize this, for being out in front and greeting folks, for having the materials ready and set up to go. And I want to give, if everyone here that's a member of the Diversity Committee, if you could all raise your hand, and everybody give them a round of applause as well. So, my job today is to introduce Mr. Tim Wise. Mr. Tim Wise is an activist and public speaker. I would call him a public intellectual. One of the most noted anti-racist public intellectuals in the United States. And unlike many public intellectuals, he's one of the few folks that can synthesize really complex thoughts into fast, easy to understand concepts. And sometimes it comes down to a meme or even a short written piece that explains, how white privilege works in our society, how white supremacy works in our society, and explains to us how to be able to find equity in places and spaces like the college, like the university, and institutions in the United States. I got wise, Mr. Tim Wise, when during the first Obama election, and it was interesting when he put together this just page on Facebook where he started talking about the qualifications of two different candidates, John McCain versus Obama, right? Barack Obama. And it was amazing to see, graduated magna cum laude at Harvard, was the chair of the law review that they have there. And then we had the other qualifications of the other candidates, and one outshone the other, but for some reason we were still reticent to say that an African American was capable of being the President of the United States. And for me that was shocking, jaw-dropping in a sense when I read that. And I think that Mr. Wise really, really has a capacity to make us think about ourselves, think about equity in our college, and really gives me a lot of hope about how we can communicate those ideas to the rest of the folks in the college and to the larger community that surrounds the college. I would like to introduce, and it is my honor to introduce, to be honest, Mr. Tim Wise.
Thank you very much. It is great to be here. I have good news and bad news, and I'm not even going to ask you which one you want first because I've already got it in my mind how this is going to go. It's actually, it's really one thing, and it might be good and bad. So actually, I'm going to do the bad first. The bad news is I've been on the road for 8 days, giving talks pretty much for 8 days in a row. So I'm not going to lie to you. I am pretty well running on fumes right about now, as you can imagine. So the bad news is I'm sort of tired. I have absolutely no idea if this is going to be good. I'm trying to set expectations very low at the end of 8 days. That way I can't disappoint you, right? Because if I told you, it could be shit, and then it's shit, like you understand. But the good news is, right, that it's the end of an 8-day leg, and as a result, and I get to see my kids tomorrow, and so I'm sort of in a good mood, which is good when you're going to talk about really difficult issues of inequity and social justice and injustice. So, it's good and bad. It's bad because I'm tired. It's good because I'm looking forward to going home. Not that I don't want to hang out with y'all, but I want to go home. Anyway, so the title that I was given for this talk, and I love letting schools like pick the title, right? I mean, sometimes I pick them, and you know, that's fine. But I like letting schools sort of tell me what it is they want me to talk about, because then it's like a challenge for me to figure out how to shoehorn all the stuff I was going to say anyway into their title, right? Because it's not like I'm going to look at their title and be like, oh, well then forget what I was going to do. I'm just going to do this. But I can always figure out a way, right, to work with the title that I've been given and make it all make sense. And so I'm sitting back there. I always do this last minute too, by the way. Not a good thing, students. Don't do this, right? I did this like 10 minutes ago. So I'm sitting back there. I'm like, how do I want to shoehorn these ideas into that? And so the title I was given was Student Success Through a Social Justice and Equity Lens. Appropriately generic and vague, right? I mean, it's also specific and important, but it's generic and vague enough for me to do like whatever I want to do. And so I was thinking about, well, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to look at student success through a lens of social justice and equity? And I think what it means is that we have to examine how we are doing with our students. And I don't just mean here at this college, I mean throughout the K-12 system and higher education as well. How are we doing with students, not just as individuals, right, but as a collective? And how are we doing when it comes to equity in terms of educating equitably all different types of students, not just those from privileged backgrounds and affluent backgrounds, not just those for whom English is their native language and first language, not just those who are members of the dominant racial group, persons called white in this society, not just men, not just able-bodied people, not just straight folks, not just whatever, right, but everybody. Because equity requires that we not be satisfied with general excellence and general success if some are still being left behind, right? So we need to be evaluating with a more holistic approach. And sometimes we don't do that. We get a little bit lazy as a society, and we take evidence of progress as being enough, even if gaps between groups are not narrowing, right? So we look at something, I'll just, like the economy right now, right? So the economy is one in which we are told things are getting so much better all the time and for everyone. And yet when you look at the actual information, right, what do you see? Well, you do see, for instance, that unemployment is down. Of course, it's been dropping, and this is not, I should point out, the reason. The reason is not the President of the United States. It's just not. But don't clap, don't get too happy. Like, it's almost never it's never the responsibility of the president when the unemployment rate goes in, or very rarely. It's really not usually the actions of a president, whether that's a Democrat or a Republican, someone on the left or someone on the right. There's a lot of things that go into what happens with the unemployment rate that really a single president can't control. And when it comes to the unemployment rate in this country, for instance, it's been dropping consistently since the recession technically ended. Right? So it's been dropping consistently for everyone since about 2011. But here's the problem. Even as the unemployment rate has dropped, right, which is good news, and it's dropped for white folks, it's dropped for black folks, it's dropped for indigenous folks and Latinx folks and Asian Pacific Islanders as well, but the gaps in unemployment between white and black, between white and brown, remain. So that when you look at, for instance, African Americans who have a college degree. They've done everything right? Stayed in school, got the paper that we told them to get, got a college degree, but they're still almost twice as likely as white folks with a degree to be unemployed. So the fact that black unemployment in the abstract has dropped doesn't change the fact that relative to white unemployment, it's still almost 2 to 1, right? Or Latinx folks with a degree, about 50% more likely than whites with the same degree to still be unemployed. Asian American and Pacific Islanders with a degree, about 20% more likely than whites with a degree to be unemployed. Our indigenous brothers and sisters, about 2/3 more likely than white folks with a degree to be out of work. So, on the one hand, we have this like generic improvement that we can say, well, that's great, it's better than the recession, right? But on the other hand, the equity lens, right, if we looked at the economy through an equity lens, we would still say that we're failing. And those 2 to 1 unemployment ratios, black to white, the 50% higher ratio, Latinx to white, the 20% higher Asian American to white, those have been true, by the way, regardless of who the president was. Those were the same ratios that existed under President Obama, the same ratios that existed under both Bushes, the same ratios that existed under President Clinton. So everyone has sort of been failing on this equity lens piece, right? It's not just a Democrat or Republican thing, it's a society-wide thing that we need to think about. Tonight, we're going to talk about it not so much with regard to the economy as with regard to schooling. But I just want to explain, that's what I mean when we talk about an equity lens. Is we're talking about how are we all doing, not just, and how are we doing relative to each other, not just how are we doing in sort of a general sense, right? And when it comes to schools, we really specifically need to think about that because we're moving into a society here in the next 15 to 20 years, as I'm sure most of you know, where the rough half, let's say, maybe as much as 52% of the American population, and certainly more than half the students in this country already, if not already, certainly within the next 5 to 10 years, are going to be students of color, right? So the idea that we can be, you know, sort of satisfied with the fact that more and more people graduate every year and more people go to college every year isn't going to be enough, right, if people of color continue to lag behind white folks, whether it's in college enrollment or whether it's in college completion, right? Because if your country is going to be increasingly people of color, and by the way, that's just a fact, like you don't have to like it, doesn't matter. Like I know there's some old folks in Arizona not happy about it at all. Some very old white people in Arizona very upset about the browning of the country, but they're like 137 years old on average, so my guess is that they're not going to get their way, so you know, tick-tock. And no wall is going to stop the browning, by the way. No wall is going to stop the browning. Right? But, so you got to have equity or else we're all going to suffer, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's not enough to just have general improvement, you got to have gaps actually narrowed. Now then, if we're going to figure out how to make that happen though, we have to figure out why that hasn't happened yet. Why is it that we continue to have such massive inequality between white folks on the one hand and people of color on the other, between wealthy folks on the one hand and working class folks and poor folks on the other? Why does that keep happening, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican? Whether it's someone who's liberal or someone who's conservative, whether it's really good, committed people or people that aren't so committed to equity. Even when you got really good people trying to fix things and make things better, they don't ever seem to really diminish in terms of those inequity gaps. So what's going on? Because, you know, either we're not very good at our jobs, because I think most people who say they want to reduce inequity mean it, but they keep failing, we just keep failing. So either we're not very good at our jobs or there's something else going on that's keeping us from succeeding at reducing inequality. So we need to figure out what that is. And in order to figure out what that is, we have to understand that where we've ended up today is a direct product of some things that came before. And a lot of times we don't know what came before, right? And if you don't know what is the predicate to what you see today, you can't understand what you see today, right? So if you don't understand how we got in the predicament that we're in, you're not going to be able to figure out how to get out. And here's the thing, when it comes to schooling, we clearly don't know how we got in this predicament, right? And I know this because I talk to teachers, right? I talk to a lot of teachers, not just at the college level, but high school level, middle school, elementary school level, a lot of new teachers, right, that are just getting into teaching for the first time. They're really excited, right? Because when you first get into it, you're really excited, right? Because it's all good. You're so excited. You're going to make a difference in kids' lives. You're not cynical yet, right? You're not burned out yet, right? You're really excited. So I asked them, why'd you get into education? Why'd you want to be a teacher? Because I know it's not for the pay. And I know it's not for the prestige, right? So what is it? And they always say something along the lines of, well, you know, because education is the great equalizer. Okay, see, you're lost. Right? If you actually believe that education is the great equalizer, you ain't paying attention. I just told you the data, right? Folks of color with college degrees still more likely than white folks with the same degrees to be out of work, significantly more so. So it's not equalizing anything, right? The typical white family in this country is just one example. The typical white family headed by a high school dropout has 1/3 more wealth on average, 1/3 more assets, net worth, than the typical black family headed by a college graduate. Think about that. Take a black family headed by a college graduate, and they're going to have less wealth on average in this country than a white family headed by somebody that didn't even finish 12th grade. So clearly education is not equalizing things. So if you tell me that's why you got into education, you're going to have a really hard time because you're going to get into this thing and you're going to figure out in a couple of years, right, that it's not quite working like you thought, and then you're going to get burned out and you're going to quit. Because you have this unrealistic understanding of the game that you're now a part of, right? This unrealistic expectation and understanding of the system that you decided to join. So in that case, you probably ought to find another hobby or get a different analysis, right? So when someone says that they want it to be the equalizer, I appreciate that, but if you're saying that it already is, you're clearly missing something. So the question is then, what is it? Why isn't it an equalizer? Why is it not reducing inequities? And I want to suggest to you that our biggest problem is that we misunderstand that as somehow a system failure. A lot of times you hear people say, well, we're failing, the system's breaking down, the system's failing us, it's not working the way it should. You'll hear politicians say that. That's why they want a little bit more money for this program, a little bit more money for that program. And, you know, some of that money would be nice to have, wouldn't it? But the problem is, if you start out by thinking the system is failing, you're missing an awfully big part of what really ails us, right? Systems aren't always failing, we just think they are. They might actually be succeeding, and that's the sort of dirty little secret, right? So I lived for 10 years in the city of New Orleans, from 1986 to 96. I was gone for 9 years before Hurricane Katrina came in. For those who recall, Hurricane Katrina in 2005 came in, did a lot of damage to the Gulf Coast, mostly in New Orleans because they had not constructed adequate levees to hold back Lake Pontchartrain. It wasn't really the storm that did the damage in New Orleans. It was the fact that the Corps of Engineers had diverted money that was supposed to be used for constructing and helping to rebuild those levees and to shore up those levees and put it into different things that maybe